Welcome to the Forest Service web tutorial on WEPPcloud troubleshooting. I am Roger Liu. I'm an assistant research professor and WEPPcloud developer at the University of Idaho. The first tip I have for you for troubleshooting WEPPcloud is don't be afraid to ask for support. So if the model is not working the way it's supposed to, or you're getting obscure errors, go ahead and send me an email at rogerliu@uidaho.edu. And this goes not only for the technical aspects of the interface, but WEPPcloud itself. If you have questions about using WEPPcloud or WEPPcloud interfaces like the disturbed web or web outputs or results, you can contact Mariana Dobre. And then lastly, if you have questions about the WEPP model, go ahead and contact Anurag Srivastava. And then if you do send us a support request, it would be helpful if you provide a description of the problem. And then secondly, the URL of the project. So when you go to WEPP.cloud and then you create a run, behind the scenes, it creates what we call a run ID for you. And that creates basically like a space for your project. And in this instance, the run ID is Forceful Slugger. WEPPcloud uses a Python library called Awesome Code Names, and it gives you run IDs with like English words, basically. And like this is just an alternative to using UUIDs, which are, like 20-digit long characters of like letters and numbers and hyphens. And they're just painful to have to transpose. And so these are just like a little bit more memorable, and they make our lives a little bit easier. And lastly, you can provide a screenshot of errors, and this is sort of an optional request, but oftentimes the error that you see on your computer, we will not see, or actually like all the time, the error that you see on your computer when you're running web, we likely will not see if we just load the page. We might be able to reproduce the error if we take the same steps as you, but we won't see it just by loading the page. So yeah, providing screenshots of errors can be helpful if you have them. And then this brings me to some general guidance for using WEPPcloud. The first is to use an up-to-date version of Firefox or Chrome. These two web browsers have been tested the most with WEPPcloud and will likely provide the best user experience. Safari is also used quite a bit by me. All right, so then the second tip is that some patience is required. So there's, lots of long running processes with WEPPcloud. It's doing a lot of geospatial processing. It's fetching a lot of data, especially with the observed climates, for instance. So, things take some time. This is especially true with large watersheds, but sometimes even with moderately sized watersheds. So some patience is required, but at the same time, don't wait too long. So if something hasn't responded for hours and hours, like it's probably not going to. And I'll give you some tips on how you might diagnose that's the case. And then this brings me to my third tip, which is that if you're new to WEPPcloud, you should start with small projects so you can get a feel for how long things should take. And then if you move up to like larger projects, you'll have a better sense of whether it's working as anticipated. The general advice is like, don't start out going for broke. It's better to start with smaller projects. And, really like if you can avoid delineating huge watersheds, you're probably better off working with small and moderate sized watersheds. And then lastly, feel free to provide feedback so that we can make WEPPcloud better and your experience better, as well as the experience of other users. And then we want to keep these tutorials somewhat brief, but I thought I'd try to address a couple of common gotchas and tips, and will hopefully give you some insight for how the modeling is working behind the scenes. So the first relates to no DB lock errors. So to talk about this, like, I guess we first need to know what is a no DB. So the idea of no DB is it's no database. So instead of having a relational database that stores all the parameters for all the projects, each project is really independent, directory based. So it's just a bunch of files in a directory, and the model parameters for any projects are stored in these no DB files. And so we could click on this one for Topaz, a topographic analysis program. And it basically shows you all the parameters for Topaz in this .nodb file, which is in JSON format. Okay, so that said, what is this this lock error? So if I click this button in quick succession, I might be able to trigger one. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So it says exception lock cleared, and then it went away. Lock cleared on already locked nodb. And the idea with this is that you have these project files that store all the parameters of your projects. The web model, or the WEPPcloud model, and the user are initiating actions to write to these files. And the basic idea is, like, we don't want to collide requests. Like, we don't want to have one process try and write to it, and then another process try to write to it and write conflicting data or conflicting information and have these files get out of sync. So to prevent that, basically, like, when you go to run an operation, it says, like, okay, like, I am going to lock this file. I don't want anyone else or any other processes to write to it while I'm performing this action. Then when I'm done performing the action, I'll unlock it, and then you can do whatever you want with it. And so, in this instance, if I click this button twice very quickly, it's like there's like two actions that are trying to simultaneously write to this file, and this is basically what it's telling me. This one seems to clear on its own. Sometimes they don't. And if they don't, and you click the button, you keep getting the same nodb lock error, then you can open up this power user panel by clicking on this this Clover command button, and you can basically click this clear locks, and that deletes all the nodb lock files, and then you can again have access to writing on them. If you have long-running processes running in the background, you might get a different error when they actually finish. So keep that in mind. All right, so back to the common gotchas. The second one is long-running processes timing out or timeouts. And so this might happen if you're building climates. The vanilla CliGen is pretty quick. Prism is somewhat quick, but these observed ones and the future climates are pretty slow because they have to go out and fetch the data, and it just kind of takes a while. And when it's running, it should tell you in the status bar what it's doing. If it stalls out and you don't know what's going on, it could be because the JavaScript that is supposed to be pulling this just died for whatever reason, which happens sometimes, but not it's I would say it's pretty reliable unless you're running like huge watersheds or you have really bad internet, and then it might do strange things. But I guess the tip would be that you can look at the log information for these long-running processes. So when you run the climates, for instance, inside of this directory view, we can go to climates, and then there's a status.log. And in here, this information is what you're seeing in the status window. And so if your updating stalls out, you can always look at these status.log files and see where it's at. And there's one of these for climates. There's one of these for WEPP. and also for the subcachments, and they'll kind of tell you where it's at in the process. And the last tip I have for you relates to browsing project files, and I've actually already kind of spoiled this one. But if we go back to this project, you can look at the directory view, and here you're basically looking at all the files that are in your projects, and they're organized kind of by, I guess, like data types. So we have all the climate files. We have the digital elevation map files. We have topaz files. We have export files, which include ArcMap resources. It kind of goes on and on and on. So land use, observed soils, watershed, and WEPP. And so when things do break, it is possible, if you're familiar with WEPP, to kind of do some troubleshooting here. We don't really expect you to, but do know that you have like pretty full access to the files that are there for troubleshooting purposes, but then just also for your own purposes. So it's possible to actually export these projects as zip archives by clicking this button here. All right, so yeah, that's my dog, but that's all I have for you. I hope you enjoy using WEPP in the woods.